Good afternoon, welcome to MEED Live. We have a special edition of MEED Live today. We're going to look at the subject of recycling and waste management, specifically waste management in the UAE. Recycling and reduction of the country's carbon footprint is a huge part of the National Vision 2021, and the UAE, as usual, is leading the region in recycling and waste management initiatives. I'm joined today by three very expert panelists. At my far right we have Dakar Al-Rabia. Now you are the Managing Director of Waste Processing at BIA. Now BIA is a public-private partnership. You're based in Sharjah and you are the UAE's biggest waste management company. Is that
Yes.
correct?
The company was established in 2007 with the vision of His Highness to tackle all the environmental and waste management issues. The company now is considered to be the largest in the Middle East, with over 6,000 employees. We have the full environmental and waste management scope of work, starting from street cleansing, collection, recovery facilities, recycling, and managing landfills.
And so BIA collects waste from the whole of the UAE, not just from, although your facilities are in Sharjah, your collection goes for the whole country.
Our mandate is Sharjah Emirate, and to reach zero waste to landfill in Sharjah Emirate. But we have a commercial department that works in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and in Northern Emirates for the collection business.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to learning about what BIA is up to. Next to Dakar, we have Carol Fielder. Carol, you are an entrepreneur. You're the founder and chairman and chief executive of Neutral Fuels. Tell us a little bit about Neutral Fuels. What is that?
We set up Neutral Fuels in 2010 as the first waste-to-fuel recycling facility in the whole of the Middle East. We make a biofuel that's clean and green and is a drop-in replacement for normal diesel fuel. And we take waste streams from hotels and restaurants and we convert them into biofuels that are used here in the local market.
And what are they used for cars or for?
We use them in trucks and in generators and in construction equipment and pretty much anything that has a diesel engine in it.
And do you export as well? So you collect the waste oil or whatever the raw feedstock is, converted into a fuel product just for local consumption, or do you export as well?
We could probably make about 3 times more money if we exported, but that's not our mission. Our mission is for the UAE to collect the waste here, recycle it here, and use it here to reduce the carbon footprint of our local market.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for your time today. And last but certainly not least, we have Sonia Nasser, who is the Executive Director for the Government of Ras Al Khaimah Waste Management Agency. So you're on the government side. We have an entrepreneur, a PPP representative, and you're from the government side. So that covers regulation as well as operations.
Correct.
As well. Tell us a little bit about waste management in Ras Al Khaimah. You know, the sort of, is it well established? Do people recycle? You know,
Right.
as routine.
Waste management at Ras Al Khaimah Emirate has been going on since about 2001, when the department was established under the Public Services Department, and we manage all the hazardous and non-hazardous waste in the emirate. We are the collector. We also run the sorting plant. We sort it, we treat it, and we also run our landfills. There is one segment that BIA collects, which is the public medical waste under the Ministry of Health. So we collect private medical waste, and the only part that we do not collect is public medical waste, and that's handled by Wikaya.
So that's from the government hospitals and...
Yes,
yeah.
Wikaya in Sharjah collects from all the 4 northern emirates. They autoclave it and then we landfill it as well.
Okay.
So we do A to Z, and we also issue regulations and do outreach and awareness for our schools and residents and businesses.
And Carl talked about biofuels. So as an entrepreneur, he's identified a niche in the market. Do you do that sort of thing as well, the sort of conversion into some alternative product?
For those things, we're looking at investors or outside partners, and we recently signed an MOU with NutriFuels to look at this waste or this resource, the used cooking oil. Because when you look at the Vision 2021, it covers municipal solid waste. But you really, if you're a waste company or government, you want to look at all your waste products that are being landfilled or not going to the highest and best use. And one of them is used cooking oil. So we signed an agreement with Nutrifuels to look at, from all our restaurants, hotels, how much used cooking oil is being generated, what's a better use for it, to recycle it and make it a biofuel, and then that can be used to power our vehicles.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. So at the heart of today's discussion, the UAE, in its Vision 2021, has set the very ambitious target to have 75% of all waste generated recycled. And that really underpins all the investments and initiatives going on in the country. So I think my first question, and I'll start with you, Daka, 75% of all waste recycled, that's a really, really ambitious target. Is it realistic? And where are we today in terms of getting towards that target?
Well, talking about Sharjah experience and BI experience in specific, I would say that the target is achievable. Specifically that we're talking about 2021. So the vision is clear. It just needs a very clear roadmap how to reach there. One of the main challenges is the infrastructure, but it's not that difficult for BIA because BIA has established the infrastructure.
And when you say infrastructure, do you mean the actual plants for management, or do you mean roads and networks?
When I say the infrastructure, first you have to have a very strong database.
Okay.
From year to year, showing you the trends, linking economic movements and developments to the types of waste and the development of the quantities and the qualities of the material that you receive. Because BIA has been since a while in the market, and because we have already our sorting and recycling facilities, we have a very solid database showing all the trends. We have provided more than, I would say, 50 to 60 waste characterization studies for different types of waste.
This is data that when you are collecting the waste, you're categorizing what type it is, where it has come from,
of course,
what happens to it.
Of course.
And so that is that quite a manual process, or is that automated? How does that happen?
That is, I would say it's a combination, but mostly it's automated. Okay. For example, our Weighbridge data is accessible by all our top management to use this data to make their decisions. We have a very informative dashboard in our head office where you can just walk in, pick the data that you want for today or for the week, for the month or for the year, make your conclusions and use them further. Moreover, we provide 2 waste characterization studies per year for each type of material. We make once a year a survey for the client's trends, their supplies, their quantities, the characterization of their material. So we actually have built a very strong database that we can build on.
And your database, so you're based in Sharjah, but you said earlier that you're collecting from across the whole of the UAE. So are you able to do sort of comparisons, Emirates and different cities or towns?
Well, of course, we are following up the trends, but sometimes we find that the studies made in other regions or in other municipalities are not as detailed. Yeah. So you can't always compare apple to apple.
Okay.
But when we, for example, engage in other projects, like for example in Dubai, when we are engaged in collection business and we're asked to do the characterization study, of course we do it as detailed as we do it for Sharjah.
Okay, thank you.
And Richard, I just wanted to bring up, as a government agency, each emirate has a designated agency that reports to the Ministry of Climate Change, and that's who's responsible for tracking and requiring that each emirate come up with a roadmap for Vision 2021. So Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, Fujairah, Ajman, Al Quwain, Ras Al Khaimah.
So all of the Emirates have a roadmap for their waste management strategy?
It's a requirement that the Ministry of Climate Change had. This process began in 2011. And the very first thing, I'm glad Daka brought it up, was that we had lack of data. So to manage something and figure out how you're going to solve it, you need to know what do you have. So data is very important. And I think the ministry, the first step when we all got together was okay, what is waste? How do you define waste? Define municipal, that everyone speaks the same language. So define...
In a federal structure, that's always a challenge.
Remember, it's a very young
So-
country.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of waste regulations here. And the first thing you start with is define waste.
So you were part of the Ras Al Khaimah government.
Yes.
How does that link with the federal government in Abu Dhabi in terms of regulation and defining
The
standards?
federal ministry is Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. They're responsible for overseeing environmental issues, and they're the ones leading the waste part of the UAE Vision 2021. So they formed committees that each emirate had to send representatives to.
Right.
Everyone is now required to report data monthly or quarterly.
Oh, really?
Hazardous, non-hazardous, very strict. Then they're always after us to make sure we report data. They send us all the categories, and that took a while to develop. And each emirate
So
had...
BIA, which is based in Sharjah,
Sharjah.
will be working to the same data categories
Yes.
as the government of Ras Al Khaimah.
We're filling,
or
we're filling, as Sonia
Everyone's
said,
filling
one-
the same form.
one and the same form,
Is this something
which we
quite
agreed
big?
on before
Yeah.
even it was made. So I think we spent maybe 6 months or 7 months
working on that.
discussing what types of waste are there.
And everyone can see all of the data as well?
Yes, eventually everyone will have a transparent view to see all the other Emirates data and what's happening, because you have to see the trends. Like everyone, we all trend higher during Ramadan for the waste. And each emirate had to develop a roadmap on how we're going to all achieve Vision 2021. And then the government entity, if you have private waste haulers, will push it down to them.
So
Eventually it gets pushed down
For
to...
Carl's company, so the neutral fuels, where do they fit? They're the private haulier that do you feed into the same database as well, or how does that work?
No, all the data is fed in through the government entity.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But the ministry encouraged a lot of private investors that, if you can't do it yourself, you need to go out, and if you don't have that expertise, look for a private investor, another entity to help you manage that waste.
Okay.
Because this is the target and you need to get there.
Okay, so we have this 75% target by 2021, and each emirate has to define a roadmap for. So I guess you can only really talk about Ras Al Khaimah, but where are you on the roadmap? Is the roadmap's in place and has been for some time? Can you say
Yes.
we're 45% there, or
We're on track. Actually, you have to update your roadmap at least twice a year to the ministry, and you have to report progress on your projects. For example, for the Northern Emirates, the ministry is studying an incineration plant as a possibility for the Northern Emirates. So that was where the characterization study for trash was very important, because you need a certain calorific value. So the Ministry of Climate Change is studying that type of in-game infrastructure for the Northern Emirates, and that's on Masdar and BIA are the ones that are studying that.
If I'm one of the viewers watching this discussion, and I'm involved in waste management or building incineration plants, for example, do I look for a tender coming out of Abu Dhabi from the Ministry of Climate Change, or do I...
For the Northern Emirates, it came out of the Ministry of Climate Change.
Right.
So they've awarded a tender to Masdar BIA to do a feasibility study for the Northern Emirates, just like they also awarded a tender for refuse-derived fuel.
Okay.
I think Besix and another company won that. But if you're with Sharjah's doing their, Dakar can explain what BIA is doing, but Abu Dhabi, Dubai, they're managing their roadmap.
Okay.
They put the 4 Northern Emirates together because we're really smaller in population and waste generation.
Okay, Dakar, you were going to
Well,
come in.
let me explain the philosophy of BIA, because I was there from the beginning, and the vision that we put for ourselves, it's to go in accordance with the hierarchy. So we started with BIA school, teaching children, reaching out to the public, explaining to them what is waste, what is the value of waste, and how we can reduce the waste or even make use of it. And then we went to building infrastructure for recovery activities. So we have household recovery facility processing between 500 to 600,000 tons a year, recovery up to 20-25%. We're going further now by processing even the food waste which is coming from this waste, which will increase for another 20 to 25% the recovery rate. We have construction and demolishing waste recovery facility with a recovery rate over 97%. We are proud to say that in Sharjah, no government entity buys, let's say, road base, sub base, or aggregates from anywhere. They take only the recycled aggregates to be used.
Oh, really?
And this is happening since 2007.
Fantastic. So the construction industry is, in terms of achieving the 2021 target?
I'm talking about the government sector now,
Okay.
but we certified our product so it can be now commercialized and used commercially even for private construction, cement factories, and other entities.
If I can come to, if I can come to Carol, I'm interested, as an entrepreneur, you would hear that, the UAE vision target, 75%, and think there's an opportunity. But presumably you would also be the community that is frustrated most by, if things aren't going as promised. What's your view on how the UAE is moving towards that target?
Well, first of all, what's the target? I mean, the target is 75% of something compared with something by some time. I'd like clarity from my colleagues here on exactly what the target is that we're aiming for. I think it's 75% of the waste streams to be recycled in country. Is that correct?
Right, and the actual regulation, it's 75% of municipal waste. But when you start looking that you're going to get this target for municipal waste, you cannot ignore the other waste streams.
Yeah.
Construction waste for us is 4 times higher than municipal waste. And then you can't ignore the other waste streams that you end up sending to landfill, like used cooking oil and other products that are going to landfill. You start thinking, you should really do it for all the waste streams. So I think, although the initial plan was just to look at municipal solid waste, we're really looking to do all of the waste streams.
And
that's
I think
why everybody has a construction demolition plant that's really necessary, because there's so much construction in this country.
If I continue describing the hierarchy that I was talking about, so your business fits in the next stage, which is the recycling stage. In the recycling stage, we have realized that the recycling is more attractive for private sector, for private initiatives than recovery. We call the recovery the dirty business, we call the recycling the clean business. And this is where we talk to private sector. We have 3 or 4 successful experiences so far in recycling plastics, in recycling other materials, recycling, for example, wood and construction material into other products. And this is where we invite the private sector. BIA, using the PPP model, can provide good support to private sector in terms of guaranteeing feedstock and in terms of providing infrastructure and knowledge, which we have accumulated through the years. So our recycling business comes as a second stage, and this is where we can explore with private sector all the...
Right. But a private sector like Carl can't possibly be successful if he doesn't know the feedstocks and if he doesn't have a government regulation controlling those feedstocks.
But equally,
When we talk about feedstock, we mean the actual waste.
Waste product or...
yeah. But equally, we don't want to get locked into an analysis paralysis. The goal is only in 2 and a bit years' time. So we've actually got to be building these plants and getting on with it. And that's why I think both my colleagues would agree that private enterprise is probably easier to take slightly more risky decisions with slightly less perfect data. We can see that there's a huge number of restaurants, and therefore there's a huge amount of waste coming out of them. And I don't need to know exactly what type of vegetable oils they're cooking the French fries in to work out that there's a huge amount of waste oil coming out of those restaurants.
Well, if I can just interrupt you, I won't name the questioner, but having listened to the emphasis on cooking oil to biofuel, this conversion and method is something which is well established and has been demonstrated for 30 years. Plus, would you agree a critical area for the region is food waste and converting this through plant to energy? The UAE produces per head approximately 3 times the amount of food waste than in the UK. So what is the strategy? So you just touched on food waste as an opportunity. So clearly this is something that people can resonate
Yes, I mean,
with.
we've for a start, we've been, for the last 7 years, converting the waste edible oils into biofuels that are used in the local market. Today, we're sadly only recycling about 10% of Dubai's waste cooking oil. We've upgraded the facility 4 times to deal with increased capacity, and we could process more if we could get our hands on it. But that's a case of working in partnership with local government to put in place regulations that push the people creating the waste streams to do the right thing with their waste streams.
So
where there's no regulation and no real push to do the right thing, they will do whatever they feel like. And we need to work closer with
So maybe I can
government.
come to the regulator here.
Right, for the food waste, we looked at that after looking at the data, what was coming in. And so we targeted our largest food waste generators. In Ras Al Khaimah was the hotels. We have 25 hotels. So we partnered with the tourism authority, because you need a regulatory body to make people do things. So with the tourism authority, we came up with guidelines, but this was only after having each hotel do trial 24-hour, 40-hour separation for them to believe, you know, you're throwing 1 ton of food away. No, we're not. Until you get somebody to separate it and weigh it for them and show them.
So some of these organizations don't even know.
Well, the GM might not have known it. The back kitchen is like, well, we're just paying, it gets hauled away.
Yeah.
You have to come to a realization what you're throwing
But
away.
it
and you
does-
have to see it and feel it. So once you see it, that you're really throwing this away, then that's a lot of money you're throwing away. So first was separating it, counting it, and then what are we going to do with it? We actually are in the middle of revising our green building code, because yes, you can compost food waste, but there's 2 rules of waste. One is don't make it. The second one is don't move it. So we are seriously considering putting in a regulation under our green building law that if you're generating over 100 kilos, you must treat it on site.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of.
This is for Ras Al
for
Khaimah.
Ras
This
Al
isn't
Khaimah.
the whole of the
No,
UAE.
there's already some hotels that are proactively doing this. The Ramada and Ajman was probably the first one to put their food composter in. Medina Jumeirah has a huge composter in there. It does like 1 ton or 2 tons a day of food. Cove Rotana has their own composter that makes liquid waste out of the food waste and goes into the sewer system. So we get no food waste out of the Cove Rotana. So it's a demonstrated way that you can do it. So, but the first step is count how much food you're throwing away. And the ministry had a lot of sessions with hotels and chefs to try to show them ways to minimize food waste. One way is to not to cook the entire buffet, have a live cooking station. So you cook as needed, because once you cook something and you put it out, 4 hours later, food control, you have to toss it. So people are being very careful about how they cook the food, how they present the food, you know, and still giving the consumer a nice buffet experience.
But we also have challenges with the supermarkets and the food that goes out there that reaches an expired date, and it then has to go somewhere. And at the moment, I was horrified as a long-term Dubai resident to know that those bottles of milk that you see on the supermarket, at the end of a couple of days, somebody collects them up, and the whole bottle, including the plastic, including the contents, are taken off and dumped in the desert. And everybody wants to do something different from that. We've got all the statistics. We know exactly how much it is in terms of quantity, but it requires, I think, some sort of private initiative to come up with a recycling system for both the plastic and the water content, because 97% of it is water, and then for the other solids that are there to convert it into something useful. We've spent 6 months researching this so far. We have another agreement with another institution in the UAE to look at how we could research further into the recycling of this. But those type of waste streams are not going to be addressed by telling the general public, drink less milk.
Yeah.
It's going to be something that we have to put in place a pretty sizable plant. But to motivate people to not throw that in the waste, we need landfill taxes that are serious and meaningful. And this last week I met with one of the waste collectors in Dubai, who was saying that currently all of his waste collection trucks, when he takes them to landfill, it's costing him 800 dirhams a day. And from May, when the new Dubai municipality taxes kick in, there's going to be 46,000 dirhams a day.
So
Let me say that BIA were the pioneers, realizing that without proper tipping fees, the mission will not be accomplished. And we started our own calculated tipping fees back in 2015. The challenge was huge because when you implement tipping fees...
When you say a tipping fee, so the amount that you charge a person that you collect from...
As I said, we are here since 2007. We're dealing with waste management, exchanging experiences with Europe, USA, since a long time. We realized, one of the first, that if you don't have proper tipping fees based on type of material, the pollution created, and the cost of treating each material separately, you can't move forward. We have implemented this system, as I said, since 2015, and thanks to such tipping system, now we have a composting facility composting all the green waste, clean food waste. We have a liquid waste facility which will take care of all the soda drinks, milk, and any other beverages. We are now building a facility to deal with the animal waste and all this type of waste. One of the main challenges here is that you implement a system which is working only in Sharjah. It was not working in Dubai. It was not working in other Emirates, and we saw that some materials trended to go down. So you never expect that the waste generation becomes less, of course, but we realized back then that some of the waste generators were sending material outside the Emirate. But thanks to the...
And that's because of the charges that you had.
Yes.
They were lower in
Yes.
Dubai than
Yes.
charges.
Yes.
So basically it needs to be federation-wide.
Yeah. Now it is happening. Now it seems that everybody realizes that this mission can be accomplished only if we unify our systems.
So
now
these charges that Carol just mentioned, so this was Dubai municipality and comes in being introduced in May.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at the moment it's for that particular person that you were talking to, 800 dirhams a day for trips, and they're going to shift to a per ton.
Right.
Yeah, currently they're charging per truck, and a truck would carry between 10 and 15 tons.
Okay.
And from May they shift to a per ton disposal fee to
So
dump
that's a
that
tipping
waste
fee.
into the landfill.
But that's just Dubai municipality. So the point that Dakar was making about people just then go to another neighbouring jurisdiction.
But they've been cleverer than that, and this has been a lot of time coming. So all of the licensed vehicles for picking up that waste have all got tracking systems in them.
Okay.
So if they go to the wrong place and dump their waste in the
They will
wrong
find
place,
you.
we will know exactly who it is, which driver was driving it, and
Okay.
the company and the driver will receive penalties.
I just wish that the infrastructure was created earlier than implementing the tipping fees. Things would have moved smoothly. In our case, we started
Yeah.
the infrastructure, and afterwards we started the implementation of the tipping fees, so things were smoother in Sharjah.
So how did you respond when you saw that people were, that you introduced the tipping fees, which was the right thing to do to encourage people to change their behaviour, but they changed the behaviour in an unexpected way. How did you respond? How did you get, was that by action through the ministry in Abu Dhabi, or?
First, remember that we are a PPP,
Right.
so the government is part of our business. So we have a shortcut to talk to the government.
Okay.
We have weekly meetings, so we always discuss these issues, and we have a fast track decision making, which makes us a little bit faster than other organizations.
Okay.
And the same way, but I think that's been the discussion with the Ministry of Climate Change, this need to have a uniform tip fee throughout the 7 Emirates. So each Emirate is evaluating that. You know, Dubai, it didn't just happen overnight. Dubai's been working on this for, I'd say, 5 years. They've been trying to get that tip fee increased. In Ras Al Khaimah, our tip fee is built in with our collection, since we also own the landfill. But the same thing with the hotels. Until we raised the tip fee on food waste, nobody was doing anything. So the tip fee
So Ras Al Khaimah also has tipping fees, does it?
Yes, and we said, we changed it for the hotels for the food waste. We said we pick up your recyclables for free. For the food waste, you have to include a 50 dirham per ton fee for that. And until somebody, it hurts them financially, then they think, well, maybe I'll figure out another way to do something. And then, like what Dakar was saying, then you have a way to justify building a composting plant and having a diversion. But it all starts with an awareness that it costs to landfill.
And that's what we as a private company would like to see for waste edible oils. We'd like to see that the generators of that waste stream are penalised if they don't supply it to an authorised recycler for recycling here, for the benefit of the people here.
So there's two parts to this, there isn't there? There's having the stake, the regulation and the penalties for
landfilling.
for breaching the regulations. But then there's actually the facilities to
process.
enable people.
And the third thing is linking those two things together. So it's all very well having the regulations, and then once you've got the regulations, private businesses or PPPs can have the confidence to spend their own capital on investing for these recycling facilities. But once you've done that, you've got to make sure that those regulations are enforced. and that they're enforced in a meaningful enough way that people actually take some notice of them and follow through.
And so would you say that we're underserved with terms of the facilities to process waste? I mean, is there a need for investment in this
I don't
area?
know who said it earlier, but one of our colleagues said it. We're a young country. You know, it's not often that you get to be involved in the formation, creation of a country and all of the policies necessary. So,
which is very exciting.
It's
and you get to
fabulous.
Do it.
It's why we're
you
here.
get to learn from everybody else's
But
mistakes.
the question, should the cart come before the horse or should the horse come? It doesn't matter. As long as we've got a horse and a cart at the end of it, it's fine.
So I'm just thinking from the point of view of anyone who is watching this discussion, who is a potential investor or a contractor or somebody, you know, is there a sort of pipeline of projects that are A, required and B, planned? I mean, perhaps Dakar,
that each emirate would have, for example, a key thing is, for us, the safety net is a landfill, but then the sorting plant. You have to, a big push now is awareness, because I think every person has to separate their waste, but then you also need to have a segregation plant, and you have to make it easy. It's very hard to sort out mixed waste. It's just
so that
difficult.
requires investment.
Yes.
And if we talk about BIA, as I said, we have been partnering with the private sector for the last 5 years. We even have our standard methodology, 1, 2, or 3, that we can propose to any private investor. We even have our own financial studies. We deal with partners based on JV or based on raw material supplier or any other model that the private investor is willing to work with us according to. And it has been really a successful experience. We're talking about, let's say, wood recycling, concrete recycling. We're talking about plastics, different kinds of plastics recycling. We're talking about alternative fuels for cement factories. We have very successful experience with one of the largest cement factories in the world. Here in the UAE, we're dealing with them for the last year. We're supplying them alternative fuel. They are happy.
So, and that alternative fuel is what? Is it biofuel?
Could be
or
tires.
This is what we call the RDF, the refuse derivative fuel. It's a mix of material that guarantees you a very good calorific value without using oil, without using the conventional
you mentioned
fuel.
Use tires. Alternative fuel is also all the things that you can't recycle, that are shredded, but then you have to have a standard where it's very common throughout the world.
Food waste that we were just talking about.
Food waste is very wet. And has
not
low
good
calorific
fuel.
value.
It is
There's a
wet.
better.
But we can process it into biofuel, and that's
Food
what we're
waste.
looking at.
Okay.
Taking solid food waste, turning it by mixing it with liquids like fruit juices or milk, and then converting that into some sort of fuel. And there are a number of well-established technologies that have never been commercialized in the Middle East, because we have a challenge with our temperature. Because those type of technologies involve bacterial breakdown of the product. The bacteria actually live in 2 different temperature bands, and we sit in the middle of those 2 temperature bands. So we're looking at special types of bacteria and enzymes in order to be able to do that in this part of the world.
So there is technology out there to, in the case of food waste, to do these conversions, but it needs to be adapted.
Cognizant to the
Let me mention,
temperature
for
here.
example, maybe the biggest partnership that we are in, BIA and Masdar, for the waste to energy. It's a JV, a new JV formed from zero, where BIA comes with its background in waste and knowledge of waste. Masdar comes with its background in energy, and we form a new company to build a new waste to energy facility by 2020. The work already started. So what we're saying is that it is always necessary to have the first stage, which is the recovery, the sorting. And it took us a long way to understand how to deal with the type of waste that we have to reach very high recovery rates that would justify the private business, that would guarantee a feedstock and a quality that would suit the private sector. Of course, our target is to segregate the wet material from the dry, and we understand that this is still a long way. Meanwhile, we have to work with what we have to reach our targets by 2021.
You mentioned the point about private sector, so we actually have a question here, which I don't know if all 3 of you can comment on this. Is why why is a private initiative the only way to tackle recycling? So we're talking about private investment.
Why is what?
Why isn't the government doing it, I think, is the question.
Let me explain.
We are doing that. For us, our initiative, had to do with a lot of outreach and awareness. We first did hotels. Now it's residential, where we're giving them a free a sorting mechanism for their homes. Brown bags for the food waste, because it's the wet stuff that contaminates our recyclables and lowers our recovery rate. So they have a green bag for recyclables,
Right.
so they can do that.
My answer is BA is going towards zero waste. This is our target, and we're going there. But on the other hand, we would like to engage the community. We would like to do it together. We're not inviting, for example, anybody to deal with municipal solid waste segregation. We know it's not attractive for the private sector.
Okay.
Unless we have very attractive tipping fee, of course, and very strict regulations. But we're inviting everybody to do recycling. We're not inviting anybody to do recycling for tires, for example, because we have one of the most sophisticated facilities in the world to recycle tires. We know that this is a challenge. It might be not very attractive. We invite business to come where it is attractive and it is feasible.
I think my answer as a private business would be that our decision-making cycles are different and maybe faster than government.
Right.
But the key thing is that because at the moment waste streams have to be processed in the emirate in which the waste is generated, it means that some of these recycling schemes have to be pretty small scale. And that means that they are more suited to private initiatives, and they tend to use more smaller but scalable technologies rather than some of the solutions that you might see on an international stage. In the whole of the UAE, the amount of waste that we're generating is probably less than London. So, we're not talking about countrywide solutions on a European scale of countrywide.
So I guess from listening to the three of you talking, the answer is there's a role for government, there's a role for the private sector, and sometimes it's more appropriate for private investment, sometimes it's more appropriate for the government. And certainly from a regulation point of view, that has to come from government.
Yeah, and I think one key regulation that is we're waiting for is the regulation that would allow free movement of all waste across all emirates.
But Dhaka, BA is doing that, so...
They're not moving it to Sharjah. If they collect in Dubai, it stays in Dubai.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
They're not bringing Dubai waste to Sharjah.
The challenge here is to have a unified tipping fees. So it doesn't happen only because I think I will pay less in Dubai, so I take the waste to Dubai. I transport the waste from one emirate to another only because the infrastructure in that emirate for this specific type of waste is available. For example, we have a very sophisticated material recovery facility, automated, that can deal with the challenge with the household waste. If the same is not available, for example, in Ras Al Khaimah, waste can move from Ras Al Khaimah to Sharjah. But on the other hand, maybe I would transfer the RDF from Sharjah to Ras Al Khaimah where it can be utilized. If we do it this way, in this case, yes, we will save a lot of investment and we will reach a better result.
Because the ministry has put that regulation out. It's in the legislative process to allow waste to move around, because one scheme is to make refuse-derived fuel, possibly in Al Quwain, but Ras Al Khaimah has a large amount of cement factories, so it would need to move into our emirate. So that's why that's important. The ministry had already recognized that, and it's in progress.
So one aspect is then to have the new regulation that will allow the whole structure to work as a federation. The other is about the unified tipping fee, so that people don't sort of exploit loopholes to cut corners. Okay, now we've got quite a lot of questions, so I'm going to go through some of them.
And mainly the movement is also for hazardous waste, for example, electronic waste. You can't set up an electronic recycling plant in each emirate. It's not cost effective, but there is one in Dubai. So right now to get an NOC to go into Dubai is, it takes some effort, but once that passes, then
the NOC is a no objection certificate.
To get all the emirates to agree on that. Lamp bulb recycling. There's only 10 million people in the UAE. There's some things that you need all of that waste material to go to one location. So that's what I think investors would want to have, because you don't want to open a plant and say, oh, sorry, Abu Dhabi can't come into this Dubai plant. So that's, half your feedstock is gone right there.
Okay, Dhaka, this is for you. So is there any revival plan for the Sharjah 2 waste to energy project?
You mean, is it feasible?
But I guess what it is asking, where is the plan? Is there a plan for another waste to energy project? And if so, what is the status of the plan?
Our waste to energy plan is actually divided into two stages. One stage that will be live in 2020, and the other one will follow. And in BIA, the calculation is to send residue, to send material which cannot be recycled further to waste to energy, not to send the waste as is. And maybe this is why, as I said, our experience is a little bit unique, where we want to move through the cycle, recovery, recycling, and only then waste to energy.
Okay, thank you. Sonia, this is probably for you. What is the government doing to educate the public? And when it says the government, let's talk firstly at Ras Al Khaimah level, because you can talk about that. But if you're aware of the wider, government initiatives,
we are aware of all the government initiatives, because that's something that the Ministry of Climate Change has everyone report. Everyone forgets there's two KPIs. One is the 75% diversion, and the other one is a 1.5 kilogram per person generation. So to get to the other KPI is awareness, to make people aware of how much they're generating. So each emirate has an education program or a KPI and a roadmap for that.
What is that second KPI then? It's
1.5. It was recently up to 1.9, I think, kilos per person per day. Okay.
And we're trying to reduce that to 1.5.
We report that because every month you report how much waste you received and how much was recycled, and you report the data to the ministry. And now we also include our tourist counts, because of so many tourists in Dubai. There's a formula for converting a tourist stay into a resident.
And how are we doing? So we've come from 1.9 down to where?
We're at 1.6, and I think Dubai's 2 something, but I think everyone is bringing their number down. So on that awareness, there's 2 factors. One is for the resident population, whoever's living here, and for us in Ras Al Khaimah, because we have a very young population, I think half of the emirate is below 25 years old, we're targeting the schools. We have 121 schools in Ras Al Khaimah. With the population of only 375,000, a lot of schools. So we developed the Ras Al Khaimah Green Schools program, modeled after the worldwide Eco Schools program, where students are taught how to recycle all their paper at school and how it should be done at home. Because we believe if we can educate the kids and the housekeepers, there's so many children, and that's the next generation, that's who will help us get to this target and this awareness. Because kids see everything in black and white. You either do it or you don't do it. Not if I have time to do it.
And on the subject of tourism, presumably that means the hotels.
Yes.
So we go back to the earlier conversation about the cost of tipping, or the new regulation in May. So the hotels will...
The hotels are
already... It might not be education, but there's definitely an incentive.
The next stage for hotels is to introduce to guests that recycling within that room. The guest room, because we have a lot of foreign guests, and they're all used to recycling at home. Italians, Germans, they're used to that. So for us, I think Kovratana is actually going to introduce guest recycling in the next month, and then the rest of the hotels will see how that's working and adapt it to the hotels. And that's one thing that the United Nations, the World Tourism Organization, actually visited our hotels and said, we have stage 1 complete. We need to move into encouraging our guests, or having a way for the hotel guests to recycle when they stay here in the emirate.
Okay, if I can skip subjects just to get through the questions. Dakar, I'll start with you, because you were talking earlier about data. When will the UAE move towards a US/EU open source data scheme for waste management? So I don't know if that question...
I don't know when this will happen, but I would support it.
Yeah.
Okay. Sonia,
right now the ministry, although we've been sending our reports in now we email in our reports, they are developing a web-based system where you can input on the web, but that would be for the ministry first to get that working before it would be open source data. But the first step is to be transparent within the Emirates so that everyone can see and test it, make sure it's working. And then, it's just data that would help investors know, is there a market for me?
Okay.
I think that's coming.
This is from Ras Al Khaimah, as it happens. So what can be done on the waste which is going out through waste chutes of existing buildings? As long as it is not segregated, this is an issue. the tenants will be always comfortable putting the waste together in plastic bags and dumping them down the chutes. So
Right. For Ras Al Khaimah, we actually have our advisory firm, Lobe, from Germany, and we've adopted a Scandinavian method, the bag in the bin program, which is brown and green bags, because you can easily add another bag for electronic waste. So our first scheme, we have about now 17,000 residents that are using this program. And for those that live in an apartment where there's chutes like Julfar Towers or on the Corniche, what we want them to do is bag their food waste, throw it down the chute, and bag their recyclables in the green bag. For us, this will reduce our carbon footprint, not having to have 2 different trucks come to pick up the waste. So it's called Bag in the Bin. It's Rack Recycles. And so it's probably the neighborhood will be, we hope by June to reach all residents. We started last September, and we have about 70,000 residential units in Ras Al
and is
Khaimah.
this something that happens in other places?
In Sharjah, we launched a program back in 2015 that we call a dual bin, or the
They
blue
have a
bin,
dual bin.
where we have reached more than 90% of the residents with 2 types of bins. One would be for the biodegradable and degradables, and the other is for the recyclables. It has been working very well. We struggled first year, but we knocked each door. We talked to people, thanks to our educational program that we have through BS School. Now we're talking about a very high recycling rate out of this program. We're working on something regarding to the high rise because it is an issue, and I think we will learn a lot from what's happening in the world to find a solution.
I don't know if this is actually relevant to you or not. Do you offer a rebate for the collection of cooking oil as we might see in the UK, for example?
We do. We've currently, the black market collectors who are not licensed are collecting the cooking oil and taking it nobody knows quite where, and it's probably going back into the food chain, and they are paying a very high rate for the amount of oil that they collect. And when you think that they're paying prices for the cooking oil which is higher than the price of diesel, you can see that there's not much motivation to recycle that cooking oil into diesel if they can get that higher price. If we were more successful in implementing the regulations, those restaurants and hotels that are selling to black market collectors would actually be penalised for doing that. Most of the Emirates have approved collectors for collecting the cooking oil, who are people that have a reputable system where you know where their waste streams are going. If you're supplying to an authorised collector, then the authorised collector should be offering a rebate, but that rebate should be something that is in line with the goal of 2021 of recycling here for the benefit of the residents of the UAE.
So the first thing, they will get a rebate, but the primary thing that we're trying to is a public health and safety issue, that it not go in back into that you're buying actually used product and somebody's telling you it's new product and it's not. It's more of a health issue.
Is there any way that can be regulated?
Yeah,
Yes.
The challenge with cooking oil is that it's so simple to get the liquid cooking oil, put it through a paper filter, add some food dye to it, and put it back into a fresh bottle and sell it to somebody else. And that's actually dangerous. I mean, in some cases it's poisonous. And this has to be regulated. And as Sonia said, it's a real responsibility of the local governments to make sure it isn't happening.
And because that doesn't fall under waste management, that's under the food control. The Ras Al Khaimah municipality is they were included in this scheme to get this thing to work, and also rack wastewater because it's also detrimental to putting it down the sewer system. So we have like 3 different agencies that needed to come together to all work on regulating this one stream. So that's what a government agency can do, because he couldn't go by himself and get municipality, get wastewater.
It goes a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, which is people want to do the right thing, but is it easy? And is the infrastructure or the support there? So if I'm a restaurateur or if I want to use some recycled cooking oil, is there a website or someplace I can go where, obviously the best company would be Neutral Fuels, but presumably there are other providers out there. And is there a website or
you can go to any of the municipality websites and look up who are the approved collection agents and the approved recyclers, and that should provide you with the right information to know what to do. But the The other thing, which is part of general education, is you have to persuade people to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And if somebody's paying you a stupid amount of money for your waste stream, then they're probably not doing the right thing with it. There's a bit of common sense required in that.
So a hotel would want to ask, where are you taking this? You want the whole life cycle of where that person is taking
And prove
your
it.
product to.
So I guess, at the start of the conversation, Daka, you were talking about digital tracking of waste. So I guess this would be a case where it would be vital. You could actually track
Absolutely.
where the waste goes and what. Okay, I think it's a comment rather than a question, but any of you can pick up on it. So waste and recycling must be federally regulated. Everyone should be forced to be held responsible equally across the Emirates. There needs to be cross-border legislation in regards to waste. So I think all of this we've
yes.
talked about so far. Even tipping fees should be equal across the Emirates, as it will enable us to all work together. So the government should partner with the private companies. So BIA is a great example for waste. And there are no real waste management companies, only real waste collectors and waste management with the government. So maybe Daka might want to comment on that. It needs to be fully supported. Even the ability to generate power from waste needs to be accepted and supported. So I think what this person is saying, basically, we're all part of the ecosystem, or we need to be part of it. Is that correct to say there's no real waste management companies, only collectors and then the government?
He's invited to visit BIA, by the way. I can give some figures. In 2017, there were 720,000 tons of recyclables that were diverted from landfill in Sharjah by means of recovery and recycling. So he's welcome to see the real waste management happening here.
And for Ras Al Khaimah, we would challenge that, because every emirate has a strategy on just not collecting the waste, but doing the full life cycle to prevent it from being landfilling. We're also looking at gasification as with an outside partner that will be hopefully operational by May of this.
Gasification is, what is it, collecting the gas from the landfill?
No, that's gas. That's another one. So we have another proposal. Gasification is, instead of burning it like an incineration, you take the waste and you break it up with a little bit of oxygen into molecules that then becomes a syngas that you can either power or put into a gas pipeline. So that's another technology that doesn't create as much residual waste material.
And to the challenge that there's no waste management, for the last 6 years, every litre of waste cooking oil from McDonald's in the UAE has been recycled into fuel that McDonald's has then used to deliver its food to the restaurants. So every Big Mac that you bought in the last 6 years at a McDonald's restaurant has actually got to that restaurant using a carbon neutral fuel.
And McDonald's is quite advanced on this, at least in the methodology for this. So that's a good case study of.
It's an excellent case study, because it required quite a leap of faith from 2 private organisations to go into this, knowing that we didn't have all the answers when we started. But what we've done over the last 6 years is proven a number of things that people thought were impossible. We've proven that you can actually make a significant change, reduce carbon footprint, do it economically, make sure it's viable, and then show other organisations the best way of doing this. So we've taken the best practice that we derived over those 6 years with McDonald's, and we've shared that with other organisations. And indeed, it's one of the parts of the project that we're looking at with Ras Al Khaimah now, is to use what we've learned to move forward.
So maybe the question was put so provocative to extract all the information from the
Well, I
from
think
the team.
so. I think it was a very well judged question.
There's a lot of things happening, which is very exciting in the UAE, because everyone is trying different things. There are so many people with composting machines that are coming out.
I'm going to interrupt you there briefly, just because we're running out of time, and I think this question relates to what you just said. So we've talked about how the different Emirates have their own strategies, and as you have just said, there's a lot going on. Would it be more effective to have a federal solution for waste rather than each Emirate coming up with its own solution?
Everyone has to feed into the federal program. So Northern Emirates, we're all tied into this BIA Masdar for incineration that's being looked at, plus the RDF project that BESIX will be working on. So they've grouped the 4 Northern Emirates, and the ministry is watching over that. And they've also left it to our own devices to do composting or C&D as well. But for Sharjah, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, everything that they're planning to do, they are reporting to the Ministry of Climate Change.
But in terms of the recycling facilities, some of them are very well suited to a federal solution, and some of them are better applied at a local solution. Right down to, as Sonia was saying, some of the hotels, they can actually be processing their waste at the hotel, so it doesn't need to travel anywhere. And certainly when it comes to the recycling of the edible oils, that seems to work economically in each of the Emirates.
So
it doesn't need
it's a very
federal
fragmented market.
On the federal level, you can put a guideline, can put guidelines,
and regulations.
and each emirate is to reach up to the level required in the regulations.
So they have actually floated, I think, last 2 years we've commented on 10 different regulations from the ministry, which would be the minimum standards federally, and then each emirate can either exceed those as they wish, because the federal ministry's view on this is that waste should be controlled at the local level.
So the federal government sets the sort of direction of travel,
Yes. Exactly.
and
We're
then
all
some
going
sort
in
of
that
minimum benchmarks, and then everyone applies it as appropriate. Okay, I have a question for Bia here. What does Bia do with food waste? Is this part of your? So we've talked a lot about the foods waste.
As I said, we have several solutions for several types. When we talk about clean vegetables and waste coming from fish market, together with green waste, manure and other sorts, go for one facility, which is composting. If we talk about expired food, expired beverages will be sent to what we call industrial liquid waste treatment facility. If you talk about the mixed organic that comes with the household waste, at the moment we are in the stage of investing in a facility that would be partially recovering it to compost and partially converting it into RDF depending on the calorific value. So this is what we do at the moment.
Thank you very much. And now I'll do one more question before I come round you all for a closing remark. So this is for you, Sonia. You mentioned the rule of waste management: don't make it, don't move it. How are you planning to follow this rule with regard to food waste produced in Ras Al Khaimah?
Right. For us, about don't moving it, we're about to, by March, put composting facilities at the fish market and vegetable markets, because we have a lot of people buying stuff still at those markets, and those would be not to move that waste. And that's why we're going to be trying to put that rule into the Green Building Code for hotels not to be moving that food waste, since they are the largest generators of it. So anybody over 100 kilos will need to have, manage it at their own facility. And that becomes different for residents, because everyone has a small amount. So we're envisioning, I think this came up at the MEED hackathon, where in a community you could have a composter, but you'd have to have the whole community bringing their food waste to that location. So that's also something that we're thinking about for the community level planning, or for our remote communities like in the South region, Shauqa, Manay, that they would have their own composting plant down there. Keep it as close as possible to the source, and then you can give it back to the farmers to use as compost.
Okay, thank you. So I'm now going to come around each of you and ask what one thing you would like to happen in the next, between now and 2021, say, to really transform the waste management culture or industry in the UAE. Dakar, perhaps I can start with you. What would be the sort of turning point initiative?
Well, for BIA, there are many key initiatives actually. We consider one of the key initiatives for the Emirate and for the UAE is the waste to energy, because it's going to be the first experience to reach really zero waste going to landfill. We look forward to it, and we think this will be a very, very good signal for the region.
Okay, Carol?
I'd like to ban the export of waste materials where there is a reprocessing plant in the UAE that could reprocess it into something useful. Specifically, obviously, edible oils. We have a plant that can process the waste. It seems mad to me that anybody would think it's logical to take that waste stream and send it to Europe for processing into something they claim is a green fuel. Surely it's not green if it's transported halfway around the world. We've got the processing plants here, and what we need to see is a more cookie cutter version of that. Let's have another one for waste food, let's have another one for other waste streams. But in order to make that really viable, let's make it illegal for you to transport that waste overseas if somebody could reprocess it here.
Very good. Okay, thank you. And Sonia, what would you like to see? What's the one?
I would like to see a much more environmental awareness from all companies and individuals, that it's their personal responsibility to reduce their waste and also to sort it properly.
So that sense of it's all the government's fault, get rid of that.
No, the government has its role to play to do the infrastructure, but they're also part of this community, and the generators need to really think about what they're producing, how they're wrapping. A restaurant, you don't need to give 3 types of packaging to the individual. Minimize the packaging, and if you're a resident, to help the sorting facilities by sorting it appropriately in your home, because that will make you aware of how much food waste you personally are throwing away. You overspend. This would save you money.
Dacher, Carl and Sonia, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I look forward to carrying on the discussion and seeing how progress goes. Thank you. See you next time.